Good morning, happy Sunday. This is Trey Olds. Welcome to the Trey Olds Radio Show. Today, my special guest is Mr. Walter Dominguez. Join us in a minute. Thank you.
Very good for you. Did I lose your connection?
No, I'm here. I can.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes I hear sounds like the phone falls out. It goes dead, and I get worried that. So, what kinds of things are you interested in talking about this morning?
Well, my first question is, how did you get started in the entertainment business? How did you get started in
film?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of a convoluted story, and I'm going to try to make it short.
Okay.
As most things are a little more convoluted, and it's never a straight line. But I got interested in originally in theater, and that was, and I think you did too, if I recall correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I was cast in junior high school. It's what we called middle school back then, in a production of Our Town by Thornton Wilder, which is a wonderful play, and very popular. The schools do it a lot, but it is a fabulous play. And I got the part of the stage manager, which is basically the narrator of this drama,
Mm-hmm.
and I just discovered that I really felt so comfortable on stage. I felt comfortable learning lines, and it just things seemed to flow. It's a great part. The writing is incredible, so it really wasn't difficult to memorize. But that I think really is what got me started. After that, I did other local productions in Pasadena, California, and children's theater stuff. Alice in Wonderland, different characters. And it was fun. I met some good friends that actually I'm close to, many decades later. In high school, I continued in theater, mm-hmm. and we toured around even to the East, Midwest and the East. I did The Wizard of Oz. I played the Wizard, and that was a lot of fun. College, first couple of years, I didn't really go back into theater, but after 2 years of intense studying, I just said, you know what, I really miss it. So got involved in college theater there at Occidental College in Los Angeles. And while I was doing that, I was in a production of Three Penny Opera by Bertolt Brecht. And
mm-hmm.
the dad of one of my fellow actors came backstage afterwards, and he was a very popular television star, had a very successful series at the time, and I was just thrilled to meet him because I admired he was a wonderful comic and dancer, and anyway, he encouraged me to, he said, you ought to continue in some way in entertainment. And so I started thinking about, what could I do in a professional way? I'm Latino, and this is back in 1969, around there.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, there just weren't too many opportunities as an actor for Latinos. And so I just kind of ruled out acting as a profession in theater, in Hollywood, television, and film production. I knew that as a theater person, it would be hard to make a living, so I'd pretty much have to, at least out here, I'd have to work in some other profession, and if I could, I'd continue in theater whenever I could. And by chance, that summer after I graduated college, I still didn't really know what I was going to do next. I had applied to Peace Corps and was accepted, and I applied to a program sponsored by one of the Hollywood unions, the guilds,
mm-hmm.
The Directors Guild and the producers. They had a program together in which they trained young people to be assistant directors in TV and film production. So I took that test and went through the interview, and I was accepted. So I had to make a choice between the two, and I decided to stay in the area and go through the training program. And so for a couple of years, I was assigned to different television shows and films and movies for TV, and I loved it. It was really hard work. And anybody who's listening who wants to get into TV and film, and there's plenty of production and outside of in Atlanta, for example, and different parts of the country. LA is still a center, but you can work in other parts of other regions. But just know that the hours are really long. You don't get a whole lot of sleep. You work intensely for a couple of months, or maybe 6 months on a series, and then it's over, and now you're looking for work again, or you need a break. But, for a young person, I think it's a great experience. You learn discipline. You really have to act professionally. You have to, even if you're sick, you have to show up.
Yeah.
And there are no excuses. It's intense. But you form a family while you're working with this group of people, because you're together for maybe 15, 16 hours a day, and in all kinds of conditions and locations, and you meet very interesting people. Of course, some big stars if it's depends on the program that you're working on. But always the people who are involved in film and TV production are a collection of people who wouldn't fit in anywhere else. I always thought it was like joining the circus. And, it was just a lot of interesting people, unusual, with, interesting backgrounds, a variety of backgrounds. So you had to learn how to get along with people, but it wasn't hard to get along with most people. They're pretty nice.
Yeah.
And so I did that for some years. I met Shelley, and then Shelley Morrison, my wife, now, and who's an actor. And then I kind of took a different direction after that. I wanted to kind of fill out some other parts of myself. And we met some Native American elders who were teachers and ceremonial leaders. And I was always very interested in religion and philosophy, history. So those three things kind of came together. We ended up going to many, many different parts of the country with these elders and listening to them, and their point of view was so different from the normal Western point of view. Had a much more holistic and earth-oriented point of view, and that really appealed to me and to Shelley. So I ended up actually spending some years doing traditional in the sense of Native American kind of healing work, where I would work with crystals, massage, rocks, various things to help people connect with them, deeper part of themselves, and it was a very satisfying and wonderful thing to do for a number of years. But after a while, I really started to miss film production, and I decided at that point in my life that a number of things came together. I had lost a very close friend. He died very young. I was approaching 50, which for many people is kind of a milestone. If you reach it, you feel, wow, well, there's fewer years ahead of me than behind me, where did that time go? So what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And how long do I have, and all that kind of stuff. The deeper questions that you ask. And at that point, I was thinking again about my grandfather, who was a Methodist minister, and he had really been a huge influence on my life. I'd spent many, many weeks living with him and my grandmother at different times, and he was wonderful. He'd take me places with him, and we'd meet all kinds of people, and had lots of adventures. And more importantly, he really gave me a basic philosophy and point of view. And I began to think about him so much, and I thought, well, you know what? I should learn more about his life. How did he come to be the man who he was?
Mm-hmm.
He certainly wasn't just born that way. Things had to shape his life. And so that led to a series of trips and interviews with remaining elders in the family. One thing led to another. I started interviewing historians in Texas, and finally I went into Mexico looking for his relatives, my grandfather's relatives, and to interview historians there, because it turned out my grandfather had been, in his early life, it was a very sad situation where he had finally ran away from home at age 5 because the situation at home was just abusive.
Mm-hmm.
And the desperation of people being so poor. He was born in a mountain mining community in central Mexico, and the poverty was just really intense. The mines had shut down, and people just had no work. And I'm sure that his stepfather was drinking a lot out of frustration and anger and having nothing else to do, and he took it out on little kids around him, his stepson.
Mm-hmm.
So my grandfather ran away, walked through mountains, the mountainous area, on his own, 30 kilometers, and ended up at a hacienda. And that this hacienda turned out to be owned by this very wealthy family, and one of their sons ultimately became a journalist and a revolutionary. He rejected having this landed status and all this wealth while everyone around him were starving. So he and my grandfather, formed a bond. Prox was his name. He was older than my grandfather. My grandfather lived at that hacienda and worked as a shepherd there and did other jobs for 10 years. And then when Prox fled Mexico because the dictator there was after anybody who was opposed to his regime, my grandfather followed him, and they ended up coming over in 1904 into Texas and then Southern California. So it was just this whole story evolved, and it took me a good 13 years to finally shape this story into a feature documentary film called Weaving the Past, Journey of Discovery. Mm-hmm. It's available on Amazon Video and Amazon Prime. You can stream it. You can see it on Google Play and iTunes and YouTube and some other sites. So it's out there, and I'm very proud of it. Shelley executive produced it, which means that she raised the money for it. And these projects take much longer and they cost more than you could ever imagine. But once you're in it, you just feel you have to finish it. You have to keep going. Yeah. And then I really did feel, and others did too, that it was important to get this out there because there's so many preconceptions about Mexicans, Mexican history. There's a lot of people who really don't know much, including Latinos who don't really know much about their own history. And so that was one motivation for getting the film out, so that people would see that, Mexico has a long and fascinating history and has produced many, many people of exceptional intellect and artistry and passion and commitment, and very courageous people. And also, there's been a lot of interaction between the United States and Mexico, not just because we share a border, but because there has been a movement of people back and forth since the very beginning of the relationship back in the 18th century, in an exchange of ideas. And we look at today and we see that, I don't know if in Mississippi it's such a big deal, but out here in California, Cinco de Mayo is something that people celebrate. And, people who are not Latino and everything enjoy the food, enjoy the cerveza and the guacamole and all that. And that's just a superficial kind of thing that shows how one culture influences another. And if you go to Mexico, you see a lot of